seekers and say hi to Ziggy. He's right here. So, hi Ziggy. I got a question. I got a question. And since before your sun burned hot in the space and before your race was born, I have awaited a question. And the question comes from Steve from North Carolina, who gave me the backing track for the Rosillos song yesterday. Although the backing track today can't be blamed on him. It's just something I found on YouTube, a drum loop. But anyway, don't be cruel. Don't be cruel to the drum loop or me. Here's the question. I have kind of a big question and was hoping you might help me out. I know you're probably busy, so I won't be fretting over an answer. Okay, but I'm just going to give you the answer right now, so don't worry about it. But what is spirituality in... Ziggy, what are you barking at? But what is spirituality in quotation marks within Buddhism? It feels like a buzzword nowadays that people use to... Jesus, Ziggy. It feels like a buzzword nowadays that people use to identify themselves. People use it as a way to say non-Christian, or as a way to separate themselves from traditional religious ontology. Good, No, he doesn't define ontology. He just writes, though belief in a spirit or soul is an ontology itself. So, I guess that's what the meaning... I never understand the word. Ontology is one of several words that I have to look up every time I see it. I cannot make the definition stick in my brain. The other is epistemology. I have no idea. I've looked those... I've looked those words up I don't know how many times. And every time I look them up, I forget the definition as soon as I learn it. And here's the rest of the question. Another example, oftentimes I hear Buddhist practitioners and teachers say something like meditation is a spiritual tool or something like that. So maybe my real question is the term spirituality within Buddhism contradicting to the understanding of anatman, which is no soul, no self? Or am I getting my whiskers tangled up in semantics? I get so confused when Buddhists identify as spiritual, especially when identity is an illusion of sorts. If my understanding of anatman is correct, we are all of the same spirit, or Buddha nature, or atomic jazz. Oneness, Indra's-net, shunyata, the void, nothingness, stardust, etc., etc., etc. My tea kettle's spirit is one and the same with my spirit. The world's suffering is also my suffering. There really isn't a distinction between me and something else because it's all the same jazz. Our brains just play a trick on us by differentiating and discriminating and distinguishing between stuff and things due to cognitive biases, illusions, desires, etc. Kind of like how Joni Mitchell says, I've looked at life from both sides now, but I really don't know life at all. And that's from Steve. And it's a good question. So there's leaf blowers going on today, and I had to stop my rendition of that song several times for the leaf blowers, and I'm just never going to get this done if I keep stopping for the leaf blowers, so I apologize for the leaf blowers. So there's two questions here as I see it. One is the use of the word spirituality. And there's two words that when I started out doing this thing that I'm doing of trying to teach whatever I learned from Nishijima Roshi and Tim McCarthy and what I learned from my own practice, there's two words I tried to avoid, which were spirituality and meditation. And I found that it was a hopeless endeavor. I couldn't do it. I have to use those words because there's so much common currency. Tim, my first teacher in Zen, used the word spiritual and spirituality pretty freely. And so I decided, well, because of the problems that Steve mentions in his email about how the whole idea of something spiritual contradicts Buddhist basic cosmology, I don't know, or maybe it's ontology, I don't know, Buddha's basic philosophy. Because that word spirituality contradicts so much of it, I was going to try to avoid the word spiritual and spirituality, but you can't. So I decided to use it the way Tim used it, and Tim used it, I never heard him define it, but he used it in a way to kind of talk about that area that we're talking about when we say spiritual. It's kind of a vague thing. So when I use spirituality or spiritual, I just mean that kind of thing that's not secular. If you divide philosophies and ideas into spiritual and secular, well, Buddhism falls under the category of spiritual, but I think it's so different from what most people think of as spiritual that it doesn't fit. Now, there's another sort of idea here, and I wish I had my Dogen books out, but they're all packed away for my move on Saturday, so I don't have them, but I might be able to refer to Dogen on this one, which is, he's saying, if my understanding of an Atman is correct, we are all of the same spirit or Buddha nature or atomic jazz, Indra's edge, shunyata, the void, nothingness, stardust, etc. Now, I agree with that. That's true. The spirit, the self, the principle behind all of everything is the same. Behind me, behind the guy blowing that leaf blower, behind the leaf blower itself, behind the helicopter that's threatening to interrupt my video again, behind Ziggy, behind this microphone, behind the little speaker that I use to play the backing tracks, etc., and the bass and everything, all the same sort of source. But Dogen takes great pains in Bendowa, particularly, and some other essays, to make a distinction between this idea of an animating spirit behind all of this, and an Atman, and the Buddhist idea of self. But these get confusing, and it's basically down to terminologies. As my questioner here, Steve, says, getting my whiskers tangled over semantics. The deal is, if you want to communicate with other human beings, you have to choose a set of words to use. When I was in Japan, I had to use Japanese words to communicate, and I wasn't very skillful with my Japanese words, so my communication was quite difficult. When the first Buddhist teachers came over here from Japan and elsewhere, Thailand, Korea, Vietnam, and spoke English, they had the same problem I had with trying to speak in a language they weren't familiar with. And so I think they got a lot more, people cut them more slack, I guess would be a good phrase to use, of just kind of accepting that it wasn't their native language and they were going to use words clumsily. Now that it's passed, this Buddhist thing has passed on to a generation of native English speakers like myself, we have to be more careful with our words because we're better at speaking this language. But we got the same problem because we're trying to talk about things to which words don't apply. So if by spirituality you mean that there's a spirit inside my body which is distinct and forever separate and different from the matter that forms my body, and that there's these two principles going on, well, that's not Buddhism. That's a different sort of philosophy. And Buddhists tend to use the word self. Sorry about that. I did a video several months ago or a year ago about Dogen's use of two different Japanese words, ware and jiko, which both could be translated into English as self or me. Ware tends to mean more something like me, and jiko tends to mean more something like the self in a more abstract term. And Dogen used the word jiko to refer to the great self, and ware to refer to the kind of what used to be called Atman. And the other thing that's interesting to me, and maybe I don't know if it's interesting to you, is when I read some of the Advaita Vedanta philosophers like Nisargadatta Maharaj, my big favorite, or Ramana Maharshi, or some of these people, they will use the word Atman to mean something, I think, quite different from what the Buddha was rejecting when he made up the phrase Anatman. So there's no Atman, but then what the Advaita Vedanta tradition did with the same problem that the Buddha found is just to redefine the word Atman, to make spirit or self means something else from what it had originally meant. So yeah, it's semantics, and it's quite difficult, but these days I just decided to just use the word spiritual and spirituality when the situation demands that I make a distinction between secular philosophies and something else. And so in that case, Buddhism falls under the category of spiritual, but in another sense, because there's no idea of a spirit as distinct from matter in Buddhism, then we're not spiritual. Dogen talks about the self as the self is fences, walls, tiles, and pebbles. Well, there's a fence or wall behind me, and there's some tiles below me. Well, I guess you can see the tiles. No pebbles that I can see. But he's saying everything is included in the self that he's talking about. So it's not a self that stands apart from the rest of creation. And so that's the sort of spiritual aspect. But again, the word spirituality is one of those words we're kind of stuck with. So that's my answer to that question. And I'm glad you wrote it, because it provided me with something I could do a quick video on while I get ready to get moving. And I don't know if this channel is going to go dark for a little while. It depends on what my internet connection is when I get to Upland, where I'm moving to. So we'll see how that goes. So either I'll be back as normal next week, or it might be a while. We shall see. So I apologize in advance if I'm not on your screens for a little while, but maybe I will be. Anyway, if you want to donate to my move and everything else I'm doing, you can go to the URL you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate, hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main and only ways of making a living, and I really appreciate your donations, especially now, because I am moving and it's costing bunches of money. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't gotta donate if you don't want to donate. Just forget it. Also, another way you can donate to me is buy my new book. It's out now. Its official release date is May 10th, but I found it in a store the other day, last weekend. Other people are getting their orders online already, so go ahead and order the darn thing and go look for it at your local store. Ask them to carry it. That helps me out a little bit. Make it a million seller, and I will hopefully not have as many leaf blowers to deal with after I move. So we'll see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Ziggy, what do you think of all the leaf blowers? You don't like leaf blowers either, I know, because you run away from them sometimes. I shouldn't say that in front of the people. He doesn't run away from them. He's very brave and he chases them off. That's what Ziggy does. Ziggy, bye.